Yeah. All right. So, welcome, Jim.
Thanks, Drew.
Happy to have you. And you have probably the longest career of anybody I've interviewed thus far. So,
You're saying I'm old.
no,
I've been around a long time.
you have a lot of experience. Let's put it that way.
That's funny. Actually, we were talking before of some of the stuff I've done. My very first play-by-play, I was in Boston going to college, and the professor assigned us all weird play-by-plays. And I had to go to the Northeastern University quadrangle, and the fraternities had a turtle race. And I had to do the play-by-play of a turtle race, which was interesting.
So, is that the strangest thing you've ever done?
Yeah, that's the strangest by far. They all had turtles, and they put them in a huge circle. And of course, whatever turtle got out of the circle first won. I have no idea. Do I remember who won? And then the next interview was Jim Lonborg of the Red Sox. So I went from the Turtles to the Red Sox. But and that was 1967. So it was great going to college the year of the Impossible Dream, probably before you were born.
Yeah, that was just a few years before I was born.
I was there when they clinched. In fact, I was pretty fleet of foot back then. I made it out to the left field wall and got a sign off the scoreboard, got it back to my dorm room. That was some crazy times in Boston in 1967. But
yeah, they went on to win the American League pennant, but could not win the World Series.
Nope, lost. Ran into a guy named Bob Gibson. Just couldn't do it. But hey, they eventually did in your lifetime, which is good.
4 times in my lifetime.
Yeah. So yeah, I have had the fortune of working in communications since I got out of high school. Actually, I wrote for the Concord Monitor while I was in high school, and that sort of got me started into sports and then getting into radio locally. And I've been blessed to be able to broadcast many championship games in multiple sports, from soccer to hockey to football, baseball, softball. And at the same time, get in and I've officiated field hockey, high school and college softball, and volleyball to kind of stay close to sports.
Yeah.
Some of the opportunities to do that doesn't always have to be behind a microphone.
So how'd this all come about? How'd you start broadcasting and decide that this was what was right for you?
It's funny. I got accepted into college for wildlife management, and I had been writing for the Monitor, and I thought, maybe I'll go into radio and I had a face for radio, as you pointed out many times. Maybe I'd go into radio and sport and kind of combine the two. So I did, and got involved in college radio and got involved in writing for the college paper. And then during summers, I got jobs in New Hampshire at various radio stations, and a lot of schlepping around, make a ton of money. And of course, there are far more opportunities for someone your age. When I was getting out of college, there weren't a ton of opportunities. Now, the world is wide open to you, from podcasting to YouTube channels. You really have to dig hard to make a good living, but it can be done. But you have a lot of opportunities, and what you've been doing it's just amazing. It's a great way to get started. What are you, 18 years old? 19 years old, and to do what you've done so far, that's given you a great, head start on what you want to do. And the more you can do on the communication side, the more valuable you are. Don't limit yourself. I'm just going to be a basketball announcer. I'm just going to do this. Branch out and try as many different things, because the more you can do, the more value you are to somebody.
Well, I appreciate that, Jim. Let's go into specifics about where you started with colleges and different radio stations.
Yeah, I went to a junior college in Boston that had a broadcast division. And after 2 years, I went to Jacksonville, Florida, and finished getting my bachelor's degree. As a matter of fact, I did a comedy show on radio in Florida with Joe Piscopo, a friend of mine, who was on Saturday Night Live. And so we did comedy on radio for a while down there. And then he went off his way, and I came back home to get married and work at a radio station. I started at WKXL in Concord, and I was there from 1971 till I went to work for the governor in 1991. And right up until that time, I did weekend sports on Channel 9 for a while. Then I get into politics, and that's another animal altogether.
Yeah. So how'd that come about, working for the governor?
Well, I did an hour-and-a-half talk show every morning. And I did all kinds of things, from cooking to politics. And I happened to interview the Attorney General at the time, Steve Merrill. And after the interview, he said to me, if I ever run for governor, I'm going to look you up. Okay, you do that. Sure enough, a year or two later, day before the election, my phone rings. And he had run against Arnie Arneson at the time, a woman who was a wonderful person, just different policies, philosophy. And he said, I'd like you to come down. I'd like you to talk to you about working for me. So I met him at his office, law office in Manchester. And he said, where you been? I know you pulled in a little while. I saw I was scraping the Arnie Arneson bumper sticker off my car. So we hit it off, and I worked for Steve for 4 years. And then he went back into the private sector, and I went to work for the University System of New Hampshire in the chancellor's office, and stayed there for several years until I got a call from the State House and went back to work there for the Speaker of the House, and stayed there until I retired. But all the time doing that, I was able to continue broadcasting. I did high school hockey for many years. As you know, I've done New England college hockey for several years, 7 or 8 years now. Doing things for the Yankee Cable Network, which is now out of the Upper Valley, YCN. They do a great job. You've probably seen some of their product when Hopkins played in their games at Kearsarge. They do a fan. Greg Hooker and his crew. They used to run the community access channel in Concord, and it was first class all the way. And they did some great things. We did Coach's Corner. We did a weekly sports show. So being able to do that as a side hustle while I was making a legitimate wage, working in politics. And then I retired 4 years ago, 5 years ago. And I don't know, frankly, I don't know I had time to work now that I've retired. Get a chance to watch my grandsons play sports, work with you. I'm gonna miss you next year, Joe. You gotta have to come back.
I'm not ruling out a return. I'll say that right now. So that's definitely, I have a lot to consider in the over the summer in terms of what I want to do next year. But
well, you have to decide what your future is. But it's amazing how many people go to college and end up 10 years later not doing what they majored in college. So to me, education is a lifelong thing. It doesn't have to be the 4 years after you get out of high school. Your education goes through your entire life. And some people don't really land on what they want to do until, 15 years later. So enjoy yourself. I'd swap with you right now. I wish I had the opportunities you've had, coming. We had a couple of newspapers and some radio stations. And now you've got the internet, you've got podcasting, you've got the YouTube, social media has exploded, and it's going to explode even more.
Yeah. What makes you say that?
Just technology. I mean, I remember as a kid thinking, boy, wouldn't it be neat if I could call someone and see them while I'm talking to them?
Yeah.
And 2 weeks ago, I'm in Lima, Peru, and my kids are talking to me on my phone. I'm thinking, this is wild. This is. Remember the Jetsons, the cartoon, the Jetsons?
I know that.
Look
that
it
was
up.
before my time.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what we're living now. The only thing we haven't got that the Jetsons had is cars that fly. I'm sure the technology is there. The FAA is just not going to let that happen. But you have so many opportunities. Just take advantage of them, and it looks like you are.
Yeah, I try and take advantage of every opportunity that comes my way.
Well, you did a great job. In not only helping me out, but then branching out and doing the JV stuff yourself. And a lot of kids would have shied away from doing it, but you jumped right in feet first and did a great job.
Yeah, it's funny. I was thinking the other day about the first time we met was last year when Mr. Meserve introduced us, and I came up there to go broadcast the middle school game that was supposed to be for us to practice, and basically, you kind of show me the way, call the game, and I just listen along and perhaps talk for a short while. But what ended up happening was the microphone didn't work on your end, if you remember that, and it worked on my end. And then we tried to swap it, and it still somehow was the one that I had worked and the one you had didn't.
I think you had it fixed so that I couldn't talk. I think
you think I wanted to be thrown in there right away,
nudging me out.
No. Yeah, I was like, yeah, let's. And I was just like, okay, I'm getting thrown in here. All right. Well,
the amazing thing is when talk about the way the world has changed and shrunk. When I worked in radio in my early days, people in this area heard you. Now, I mean, I do New England college hockey, and it's on the web, and I get emails from parents in Sweden, in Canada, and it's just amazing that the world has shrunk that much, and you can, and people in Europe can watch your YouTube channel. If you have relatives over there, They can watch it.
Well, a big supporter of mine has been MJ. He's been he for sure has been both with the commentary and with the channel, and he's been showing it to people out there in Slovakia. So shout out to them if you're listening.
Well, he told me the other night he'd be watching next year.
Yeah.
He said he'll be back in Slovakia watching it. What a great kid! What a great impact that kid had in this community.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Totally agree. So it's kind of cool that you're just sitting here in the small town, and all of a sudden, just as a young guy, you get this opportunity, and then
Yeah.
you got people, you have grandparents who listen to their grandkids, but they're out of state. So I'm talking to people across the country are hearing me, and then people across the ocean, like out there in Slovakia, listen to me and us calling the games as well, which I think is very cool.
I did a hockey game once, and we're doing it on the internet, and I think it was Bishop Brady, and one of the kids' fathers owned a restaurant, and he has since passed. He owned a restaurant, and I mentioned the kid's name and his family and the fact that he's got relatives in Greece. They were listening, and when I went to the restaurant the next morning, a Sunday morning, the guy comes out and said, "My brother in Greece was listening last night and told me to buy you breakfast." So here's a halfway across the world listening to me, probably couldn't even understand English, listening to me do a hockey game. So it is, and even our games here at Hopkins High, you don't think that there's a lot of people listening. I mean, we did it during COVID for the obvious reason that people couldn't get in. And then once the gym opened up and people could come in, we figured, and let's keep doing it. And there are still people out there, not by the hundreds, but enough where I think it's worthwhile to keep doing it.
Yeah.
Oftentimes the parents of the kids will say, "Hey, my mother's listening, my sister's listening." I heard the other day that the A-frames, what's Noah's brother's name?
Max.
Max out in college. They all gathered around the computer to watch Noah play basketball this week, which is kind of neat.
Yeah, so we're making our way over to California, people listening over there.
Yeah, well, poor MJ's parents had to get up at dark 30 to watch him. I mean, when we started at 7, they were like at midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, I think it's 1 o'clock because it's a 6-hour difference.
Yeah, so I told MJ, "You're gonna have to get up early in the morning to watch us next year. I'm assuming we'll still do it. Hopefully you'll be around to help out."
Yeah, like I said, I haven't finalized plans, but I wouldn't rule out a return. I'd certainly enjoy to turn working with you, Jim.
Yeah, we had a great time.
Yeah.
And we had a good team to follow.
Yeah.
Which, as I've told you, sometimes we'd have a blowout. In many cases this year, the early blowout was Hopkins blowing someone out. And sometimes it's tough to make a game sound real exciting when it's, a terrible game. I mean, it's not easy. It's easy to do a game that's nip and tuck and decided in the last period. You get into it, the fans are into it. But when it's 35 to 10 at halftime, it's like bring out the B material. What we're going to talk about. So, but you did a good job.
Yeah, I think that's been the most challenging thing for me to learn. But fortunately, as you touched on, I mean, we had where I called all 4 this year. We had both of our varsity teams make it to the Final Four, the only Division III school to achieve that, and both of the JV teams only had 2 losses throughout the entire season.
Well, another thing you did that's not easy to do with people listening is doing games alone. I mean, I've been doing this for years and years and years, and it's much more difficult to do the game alone because you don't want to bore people with it's good to have 2 voices where you're bouncing back and forth. And to sit up there and to do a JV game and do it by yourself and make it sound interesting is not easy. It's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah. I found that was challenging initially, and I think for me it was just having material there was super helpful.
Preparation, as I told you day one, preparation will bail you out every time. And you may have reams of stuff prepared for a game that you never get to. I go down and do the Babe Ruth Softball World Series on TV every summer, and in fact this year they're sending me to Branson, Missouri to do Babe Ruth baseball, and I easily put in, actually, even for Hopkins in high school, I probably put in 2 hours of prep for every game. But it's there. And if you need it, if it's a 15-0 game and you need stuff to use, you've got it there.
Yeah.
And I've never bothered when I looked the end of the night and I said, I didn't use half that stuff. So what? It's up here now.
Yeah.
So preparation is so important. And you just don't step on and turn on the microphone and go. I mean,
Yeah.
if you can do it, you're good, but.
I've observed that. I mean, like even I'd say like it was challenging kind of breaking the ice for me where you're just like starting to talk and you have no idea who is listening and
But you can't worry
that
about
whole
that.
feeling.
You can't, you got to look at it that people out there are saying, I wish I could do that.
Yeah.
It's like public speaking, when you get a group of people. You don't be nervous, just they're sitting out there saying, boy, I wish I could do that. I wish I could get
Yeah.
up there and talk in front of people.
I found it easier once I got into it that to kind of talk to just microphone where however many people might be out there listening. I don't know, but have that and theoretically, I don't know.
I was
But, like,
always learned that you're talking to one person. You're not talking folks, people, hey, everybody. As if you're talking to one person, your mother, your father, your brother, you're relating to one person, and then each person out there will feel that you're relating to them.
yeah.
And I think that's important. But you did good.
Yeah. Well, I had a pretty good teacher,
Yeah,
I think.
well, that remains to be seen,
Oh,
but we'll get you back next year.
well, we got other stuff to go over. So you also have made it to multiple halls of fame. So I wouldn't say that you're not very good at what you do. I'd say you're very, very good at what
Well, appreciate that. I was blessed to get voted into the New Hampshire Legends Hockey Hall of Fame in 2012 as a broadcaster. And then I got into the New England Babe Ruth Hall of Fame, which was a great honor. But then I was shocked year before last. I mean, really shocked that the International Board of Directors gathered in somewhere in the Midwest and elected me into the International Babe Ruth Hall of Fame, which I believe I'm the first softball representative from New England to ever get in. So that was a true honor. But yeah, usually you don't get into those things until after you're dead. So I'm happy that you put me in while I'm still alive.
Yeah. Well, you told me, I think when that you first received that award, like how many people get accepted each year and how many applicants there are for that. And that's for the Babe Ruth International Hall of Fame.
Boy, I have no idea how
But
many.
it's a small percentage that get in.
Yeah, it's a very small. They usually will pick one or two a year from everywhere, the globe, around the world.
Yeah.
Because it's the international. So I don't know. I know when I opened the letter, I was truly shocked.
Yeah.
I'm thinking they must have gotten to the bottom of the barrel.
Give yourself some credit. That's a
What
great
did they do?
achievement.
But yeah, it was a nice honor. And then they had a nice presentation down in Nashua. All the Monkey Monks came up, and then at the World Series last year they did some stuff. So it was nice. There was one other guy from New Hampshire. He was a baseball guy out of Franklin who made it many years ago that I had the good fortune of meeting at the Babe Ruth World Series in Concord. And so I met him. It's interesting. I did broadcast the very first Bambino World Series, which is basically Bambino is the equivalent to Little League in terms of the age. It's now Cal Ripken, but when Babe Ruth started, it was called Bambino, and they had a World Series in Nashua. And I had a chance to do that game with Ray Bailey, who was the baseball coach in Merrimack Valley at the time. And the MVP of that tournament from Oakland, California, was Jimmy Rollins,
Wow.
who went on to become a great baseball player with the Phillies.
Yeah.
And he was the MVP of. And now come full circle. I'm going back to Branson this summer to do the Bambino, which is now Cal Ripken World Series.
Wow.
So, but yeah, I'll never forget Jimmy Rollins. He was 12 years old.
So, I mean, there's a lot there. So you have so many different experiences and you've met so many people throughout your entire career. Is there any like time where you met somebody who was super famous and you were starstruck by?
I'm trying to think. I guess I always learned that they all put their pants on the same way I did. So maybe it's just me. Because I did so many interviews on my talk show, and met so many people that I can't say that I was ever starstruck. I had great respect for a lot of the people I got a chance to interview, but I was probably the first one I ever did when I did Jim Lonborg. I was pretty nervous because I was a kid in college, and I had to go interview this guy who was the star of the '67 Red Sox. So I was probably nervous there, but no. And most people are great to interview. They want to help you. I find that hockey players are the most down to earth, I think, of professional athletes. They just are, just a fact.
Yeah. So on that point, maybe not necessarily the most starstruck, but like the your favorite people to interview, or maybe the most famous people that you've interviewed.
In sports or both?
Both.
Sun Young Moon, um, Governor Sununu, John Sununu was an interesting interview. Um, Walter Mondale, a lot of athletes. When I first started, it was unheard of to put an athlete, a high school athlete, on the radio or to get a quote in the newspaper. You just didn't do it. And then back in I want to say in the late '70s, a guy I worked with, the name of Harvey Smith, was since passed, started doing it. He was a teacher. Kids felt comfortable with him, so we'd interview them. And I just think it's the most difficult interview to interview a high school student, um, but you get more out of it, and they're genuine. I mean, you've interviewed the kids here at Hopkins and done a great job at it. But I think my favorite interviews are actually the younger people. I've had a chance to interview a lot of people on my talk show. Their names escape me, some of the ones that I've interviewed, but I happened to be at Cape Kennedy when the space shuttle blew up. I was broadcasting on the air when that happened.
How did you handle that? That's
Well,
crazy.
it's funny because it was the first time I had seen a space shuttle lift off, and so when the trail of plume of smoke went, I thought that's what it's supposed to do.
Yeah.
And back then, it becomes so routine that stations would sign on, do the liftoff, and sign off because that was it. Well, I was doing my talk show from Florida, and I'd been on all week interviewing people. In fact, I interviewed a little fourth grader who was there with his dad by the name of Chris Sununu, who's now governor.
Yeah.
He was in fourth grade. I know I'm old.
I didn't say that.
You keep implicating. What my train of thought here? So I'm on the air, and my wife was up on the roof with the cameraman who took that famous photo that we see over and over again. And he lowered the camera and said, "No, something's terribly wrong." And Christopher Glenn and Frank Motek for CBS had got the broadcast underway. I saw them reach over and shake hands. They went off the air, and then it happened, and then all hell broke loose. And it was just one of the most terrible. The morning driving into the parking lot that morning and seeing the temperature at 19 degrees and icicles on the space shuttle. And I get angry when I've watched the Challenger documentary, and I get angry watch it. So, but I had the good fortune of interviewing Krista a couple of times before she went. She was a friend, and her husband Steve was a friend. So that probably the most memorable thing I ever covered in broadcasting was the space shuttle when it went down.
Wow. It was very tragic event.
And that was before that was 86, right? So
I don't know what year
Yeah.
that was, but
When
that was
year were you
before my
born?
time. 2004.
I have stuff in my refrigerator older than you. I do.
Wow.
I have a pair of jeans older than you.
I never said you were old.
No, you did.
You self-imposed. But yeah, so that's a lot of cool stuff. So your schedule, I mean, I think people nowadays, you go to work, you have your 9 to 5, and like that's what it is. You sit in your cubicle and you do your work for the day. You're with all these different radio stations. This is something totally different.
Totally different. I do the New England college hockey in the winter, obviously. The other stuff is hit or miss. When people need me, it's more freelancing. They'll call. I'm pretty much retired. I call retirement 6 Saturdays followed by a Sunday. That's retirement. And a good share of my retirement is taken up by watching my grandkids play sports. Of course, Abram and Eli went here, and I have 4 other grandchildren, 3 who are up in the Kearsarge School District, and they're all playing hockey and lacrosse. So, and they're like 6, 9, and 10. So they're moving on the way up through sports. So I get a chance to watch them. I love watching youth sports, and that's why I've stayed active by umpiring and officiating sports. I like just staying with the game, and I would encourage anybody, especially the young ladies who get out of basketball and come back to the community, is to get back in, get involved in umpiring, get involved in officiating, or get involved in coaching. It's a great way to stay in it. Unfortunately, sometimes your job does not allow you to do that, but we're certainly lacking in good officials in the state from those that have aged out, COVID, retired, and there's really a dearth of officials in all sports in the state.
Yeah, and I feel like that's also true throughout the country, but it's very
Yeah.
prominent in New Hampshire. So there's been a lot of issues across the country where you have somebody who's, in charge of running a game as an official, but the parents have a lot of backlash about it. And then people, they realize they don't want to do it anymore. Do you feel like that's the main problem, and how would you
Not,
solve that?
not in this state so much. Because I've done some World Series and I've done a lot of regional stuff, and you see teams come in from out of state to play, especially summer ball. But coaches, I gotta say, by and large, in this state, yeah, you'll get some chirpers once in a while. It'll get on you, and when we make a mistake, and we do, they rightfully, get on you. But coaches in the state are pretty good. I think nationwide it's a problem. Is with people just said, I've had enough. I'm not listening to this anymore. In all my years, and I've been officiating since 1986, I've never thrown a coach out of a game. Because I think there's a way of dealing with it. That's not to say if they didn't drop an F-bomb on me, they're gone. That's never happened. But I think it's retirement. I think when COVID came, a lot of people got out of it and then just decided not to go back. And I also think because most of the high school sports are in the afternoon, except for basketball. And so you've either got to be retired, self-employed, or independently wealthy, because how do you get out of work to go to a high school soccer game at 3 o'clock? Basketball's at night, football tends to be weekends. So I think it's the time of day that prohibits people from getting involved. But I don't think in this state it's as much the coach. Parents can be pretty brutal too in some sports.
Yeah.
But we're pretty lucky in Hopkinton.
So
Very lucky.
from the perspective of an umpire, what would you want viewers to know about what you go through just in that role?
Well, I mean, to be a good official, you just have to keep doing game after game after game. You can't learn it out of a rule book. You have to know the rules. When you first start out, you show up at the field, you say, oh, good, he's been doing it a long time, so he'll know what I don't know. And then it eventually flips. After you've been doing it for a while, now you're the guy. When they come to the field, they say, oh, there he is. He knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
But there's always something that'll happen that has never happened before. But you just have to make sure you know the rules and make sure you have a good demeanor and have fun. You're there to make sure the kids have fun. And that's all there is to it. It's not rocket science.
Yeah.
You should have a love of the game. And if you were a soccer player, you don't have to have played the sport to officiate it necessarily. It
Okay.
certainly helps. Although there is one, I would never attempt to be a wrestling official. That is so subjective. Unless you've been a wrestler, I wouldn't even begin to think of officiating wrestling. But you don't have to have been a great baseball player, a great football player to be an official or to be a coach. But you can still get into it. And I would encourage anybody, start out in the youth league, start out doing 10 and 12-year-old girls and boys.
All right, so that's all. I mean, that's a totally different perspective. But I also want to hear a little bit about your thoughts on Major League Baseball with the robo umps. So I have you here.
With the what now?
The robo umps. So what they're
yeah.
yeah.
I'm an old school.
Okay.
Although I kind of like the pitch clock.
Okay.
I think that's shortened up the games. But I'm not a fan of the designated hitter. I'm a purist. I'm a baseball purist.
So
I go back. My childhood was watching Hank Aaron, Willie Mays, and but I would much rather go to a baseball game than watch one on TV. I'd rather listen to one on radio than watch one on TV. I'd have a radio in the yard while I'm working. I love listening to baseball. Hockey's another one. It's much more conducive to being there than watching it on TV.
yeah.
For my money. But some of the changes in baseball, I don't know why. It's just, if it's not broke, don't fix it.
Yeah. So why do you like the pitch clock?
I think because I think games have gotten too long.
Mhm.
When you got games that are 3.5 hours long,
That's a problem.
it's a problem. Some of the Yankee Red Sox games that go on forever.
5 hours.
Yeah, and so far the pitch clock, it's working.
Mhm.
Games are, they may have a game under 2 hours.
Yeah.
I've had softball games under 1 hour.
Wow.
Wow,
That's crazy.
I think some of the changes I'm not for it all.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on this. I was fortunate enough to go to the Fisher Cats last summer and get to talk to some of their broadcasters and get their perspective on that. And
Bob
kind of,
Lippman?
yep, I
Yeah,
did.
Bob's a good guy.
Yeah, he is. So I was fortunate enough to meet him, Steve Goldberg, and we spoke about like the different rule changes and our thoughts on that. So I mean, it's that's what they've been doing. They've at different minor league levels, they've been testing out these
That's why they
rules.
do it, yeah.
Yeah, and then if they think it works, then they bring it up to the majors next year, which
Yeah.
is what they're doing this season after last season. So I mean, there's a lot of stuff there. I mean, we don't have time to probably get into all that today.
No,
I just thought it was interesting to touch on that because you have that unique perspective.
Yeah, no, I'm an old school baseball fan. You know, so I'm not for a lot of these changes, but again, I do like the pitch clock. I think that will help. I wish they improved some of the umpiring on the major league level.
Yeah,
I see better umpiring on the Fisher Cat level than I do in the major league sometimes.
yeah.
But-
And you also have guys who are throwing 90s
Yeah.
in the major league,
Yeah.
so that's
Yeah.
very tough to do.
Yeah, you just wonder how the arm can sustain that for a long period of time, you know? But yeah, it's not easy. It's not easy. Although I would rather umpire behind home plate than be on the bases because that's where all the action.
Mhm. All right, so
Yeah.
cutting back into what you were speaking of earlier, how do you balance the career in politics with a career in sports? Because that's very interesting.
Well, politics is a blood sport, right?
It is.
Sports was an outlet for me because there were times in working in politics, it got stressful, depending on what issues we were working on, and who we were fighting against. And sports is a great outlet. Just, in fact, the day my mom died, she died on a Saturday morning. I had a game scheduled for Saturday night, and I went and did it. And it was the most cathartic, best thing I ever did. Is she had passed away, and I told my wife I'm going to go do the hockey game, and it was wonderful. So it's a way to kind of forget about everything. Go to the field, umpire the game, or broadcast the game, and you forget about it because you're focused on what's ahead of you.
I found that's been the case for me calling the games here, whether someone's, just we all have bad days, and whenever that's the case, it's always great to come here and be able to call the game and get your mind off.
Yeah,
of it.
you just totally forget what's going on in the world around you, and so yeah, it was not difficult at all, and I was fortunate to have a boss that allowed me to leave and go do a game, realizing that if I still had work to do, I'd go back after and go back at night. So I had a boss that allowed me to do that.
Okay, so yeah, that's a lot there. I mean,
I've been very, very lucky. I've been very, very blessed with the people that I've had been able to work for.
yeah. So you've been able to balance that career. So with us, we have our voices that go out over the air. So how have you been able to use your voice to, get out there and speak with people and you think improve the world, just regardless of that's making people happy or?
I don't know if I've improved the world.
Well, I mean, I think
I
it improves people's lives when they listen to us and they hear just at the end of the day,
I feel that was more true when I was a radio announcer and I was on every morning, coming into people's homes, reading the school closings. I mean, this was before the internet, so when school was closed, our phones would ring. I'd have hundreds of phone calls. Is there any school today? Is there any school today? And it's no, there isn't. No, there isn't. No, there isn't. And but I think coming into someone's home on the radio, I think hopefully we kind of brighten people's lives.
Yeah.
But I don't think I've done much to change the world. Joe, sorry to say.
I don't know. We all have our own individual roles. And
Yeah,
I think it's interesting to think.
yeah. I mean, anytime you're in communications, you're impacting somebody somehow, and maybe there's some little kid, listening to your game, during Hopkinton that may say, "Gee, I'd like to do that someday."
Yeah.
You never know. You don't know who's out there listening.
Yeah. I also think politically, like, I don't know. I don't want to go into the weeds of politics, obviously, because that can be a crummy spot, but to say the least. But I think if you're fighting for something that you really believe in that really benefits people and policies like that, that can be powerful.
Mhm.
I mean, we have the First Amendment and we have our First Amendment right for
right.
free speech and
Second
freedom
Amendment.
of press. So,
Right, freedom of the press.
so
Unfortunately, in my opinion, I don't think there's news anymore. there's entertainment. Yeah, you'll get the news on Channel 9, they do a good job, but you watch Fox, you watch CNN, you watch MSNBC, it's entertainment, that's not news.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, it's not news. Yeah, it's just not. But yeah, politics certainly has changed since, when I was involved early on, we'd go toe to toe over an issue, fight over an issue, and then go have a beer together at night. And now they want to hurt you, they want to discredit you, the opposition, wants to, hurt you any way they can. It's not fun. I get out just at the right time.
Do you think there's any small tips for a solution that you might have, or do you think it's just
Solution for,
just how brutal the culture is right now around politics, or it's just stay out of it?
stay out of it. Yeah, I don't have that answer, Drew. It's just, first of all, I think term limits might be something we should think about in Congress. I think some people stay around too long.
Yeah.
Make too much money. Term limits might do it, but money is the root of all evil in politics. I mean, to run for state senate in New Hampshire, you probably got to raise $100,000, and that's for a job that pays you $100 a year. Imagine if you're running for Congress, or if you're running for governor, the money you've got to raise.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so difficult to beat an incumbent who's been there 3-4 terms, because they built up such a war chest. So.
Yeah, I agree. I think money in politics, without being too controversial, I
Right,
think that's
yeah,
pretty.
This is a sports.
Yes, this is,
the
but
sports.
I think
And
across party
the opinions
lines,
you're hearing right
money
now
in
are of
politics.
Drew and not me.
Yeah, I think it's pretty well agreed upon between right and left that, money in politics isn't.
It is.
Anyway, so we're coming towards the end here, but I know the answers to a lot of what I'm going to ask you, but for the sake of our viewers, I'd appreciate it if you could elaborate on this a little bit. What's your advice to young broadcasters out there who might want to be kind of replicating where you had?
Well, like I said, there are so many opportunities, far more opportunities than there were when I came out of school. I would just say find what you love doing and do it, and just work hard at it. There's a number of great schools to go to. Syracuse University, the Newhouse schools are a great school for communications. And even you get down to some of the smaller schools, and Emerson in Boston is a great school. There are a number of great schools that offer communications. But I just get involved somehow, get involved, even if it's, working in a newspaper. I used to go into the Concord Monitor, even when I was working at the State House, and help them write up the softball scores. Just go in there, they'd phone in the scores, and I'd help write them up. Just get your foot in the door, and again, the more you can do, the more valuable you are.
All right. Well, do you have any additional thoughts, or is that all from you?
I think that's all for me. I think you've heard
All right.
enough of me. And I want to thank Drew. He did a great job this season. I really enjoyed working with you, Drew. I hope you do come back, but if you don't, I understand. I won't be your friend anymore if you don't come back. I just hope they can find someone that can help out on the JV level next year. But
Yeah.
I think you came so far this season. And thanks for having me on. This was
Yeah.
kind of fun to sit back. It's like
I
my
agree.
St. Patrick's Day shirt.
Oh, I love that
Yeah.
shirt. So likewise, I enjoyed working with you, Jim, and I give you immense amount of credit for getting as far as I've gotten. Yes, so thank you
Well,
so much.
I look forward to seeing where you are in about 10 years. I hope
Yeah.
I'm still here in 10 years.
I do too. I think you will be. All right.
Not here, but just here.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Jim.
All right, thanks.